Hi there, and welcome to Insomnia Insight number 322. I'm Coach Daniel. I'm excited to have you here to talk about the 5 most common reasons somebody sends a comment, submits a comment or an email saying something is really weird, something really off is going on with me. When somebody says that, often very worried that something is terribly wrong, it's typically one of these 5 things that we're going to talk about today that they're experiencing, that you may be experiencing. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to talk about what is that underlying cause for these bizarre things going on, or seemingly bizarre things going on. And then we're going to talk about what you should do, how you can not have these experiences or have less of them, or not maybe experience them the same way, perhaps. All right. So with that said, let's get started right away here with a very common one, and that is this one. You are just not sleepy at all. You're just not tired. And throughout the day, you have maybe even a sense of like this electricity inside you. You're just it's bizarre. That is a very common one. In fact, somebody asked about that the other day. So that's number 1. And number 2, I want to call a Swiss awakening. It's something I came up with the other day. And this is when you, like clockwork, wake up at a very specific time. People often think this is kind of bizarre. Like, for some reason, I wake up exactly 4 a.m. Every night. Or I wake up exactly 4 hours after I fell asleep. That's number 2. Another thing that often seems really bizarre. Another very common one is this: vivid dreams. Very colorful dreams that seem to one blends into the other. This continuous episodes of vivid dreaming is a very common one that people often are very worried about, and often it's mingled with this question of is there something wrong with the type of my sleep? Am I in this weird, is there something wrong with my sleep stages or something like that? Often a common question that comes with that one. And then we have a number 4 here, which is minimal sleep, and that's often tied together with number 1, which is I don't feel tired. So often you have this combination of it's so bizarre. I literally don't sleep hardly at all. My entire night feels like a long episode of wakefulness. I can hear everything that's going on. I wake up at the drop of a hat if I'm even asleep. I'm not even sure if I'm asleep or not. People tell me I'm asleep, but I'm not sure about that at all. And I don't feel tired. That combination often seems very bizarre. And then finally, we have number 5 here, which is jerks and awareness. And these are as you're about to fall asleep, you have a jerk, or you have a twitch, or you have some sensation, or you become you're about to fall asleep, and then you feel like you're suddenly aware, oh, I was about to fall asleep, or you're about to fall asleep and you have the sense of falling, and then you wake up, something of that nature. So we talked about these 5 things now, 5 things that often are described as very bizarre, and people that experience them again often think there must be something really wrong with me. There must be something really, really weird going on here. And that's not the case. That is not the case. The reason this is going on is, a lot of people probably know what I'm going to say now, but it is hyperarousal. These things are caused by hyperarousal. And by the way, in the sleep world, pretty much always when there's something bizarre, weird, strange, unexplainable going on, blame it on hyperarousal. That is typically the culprit, definitely the culprit when it comes to these 5 things. So for those of you who are a little bit newer to the channel, what is hyperarousal? Hyperarousal is just this heightened emotional state where you are hyper aware of what's going on. Your senses are heightened. You hear things you normally wouldn't hear. You see things that you wouldn't take notice of. You feel like every little thing that you feel becomes emphasized, a little tingle. It becomes oh, I definitely feel that. I feel this twitch. I feel this. And so that is hyperarousal. And hyperarousal is pretty neutral. It can be caused by many kind of underlying emotions, meaning you can be very anxious and hyperaroused, but if you're all anxious, then that's a little bit different, because then you know what's going on. You identify anxiety. With hyperarousal, it's more neutral. It's like you don't really feel anything in particular, and that's why these things feel so bizarre, because it seems like I'm not anxious. I'm pretty much in a normal state of being. But all these things are happening. So hyperarousal has this kind of neutral tendency, which makes it more sneaky, more strange and bizarre. But again, so anxiety is one thing that can cause it, underlying anxiety. Excitement can also cause it. So the many reasons you can be hyperaroused. Now, what I want to say here before we talk more specifically about like what you should do if this is happening is I want to really try to normalize hyperarousal. There are many instances where you are very hyperaroused and you don't think anything of it. For example, let's say you're going to get married tomorrow. If you're going to get married tomorrow and you wake up like clockwork, at 4 a.m. you're wide awake, or you have slept almost nothing, but you're still feeling like kind of very energized, or you sleep very little. Or you have vivid dreams, like all that seems very normal. That's kind of expected. Or for that matter, if you watch like the 100-meter dash, and these people, these athletes are on the starting blocks, they're super hyper aroused, right? They're super like ready for something to happen, and they often like jump. Even if somebody in the audience sneezes, so like a jerk is completely normal in that circumstance. And even like from a like real big picture, historically, why do we have a hyperarousal? Well, it's I think as many other things, many other emotions and states of mind. It is a safety thing. We're supposed to be hyperaroused to make sure we're safe, etc. That's kind of the historic thing with it. So the thing though is that nowadays, our minds can often get a little bit confused. There's nothing there's nothing unusual or strange with hyperarousal. It's just the context can be a little bit off, if you will. For example, a classic one is that you have a hypnic jerk at some point, and then you for some reason you take note of it and you think it's kind of odd and bizarre and strange. You think more of it and you become more and more hyperaroused, and then you can have more of these events. For just an example. So let's say you find that one or more of these things are things that you've experienced. What should you do? Number one, as always, is education. And really, hopefully you'll feel that all the education you needed was in this video about these phenomena, let's call them that. And education is so important, because when you understand why something happens, when you're demystifying something, then the hyperarousal often by itself kind of comes down, because you see like, a lot of people have these. They're very common. There's nothing strange. I'm just hyper aroused. That in itself is so helpful in decreasing that hyper arousal. So education is number one. Now, number two I want to mention here is resist that urge to Google it, go online, figure out what's happening. And that goes back to number one. If you don't understand what's happening, then of course you want to go online and try to figure it out. But now that you understand hyperarousal, you understand why these things happen, then it will be hopefully easier for you to resist that urge. Because if you go out and you Google it, you go in a Facebook group, a Reddit group, talk about it, you get all types of information that, people suggest, it's your magnesium levels. No, it's selenium. No, it's this. No, it's that. And that, makes it seem more mysterious. Maybe it's that. Maybe you should do this. You pay more attention to these events, and you become more hyperaroused, and you have more of them. So it's always good to kind of resist the urge to try to figure out what's going on, and instead be like, okay, this is hyperarousal. Nothing strange with that. And number three here is allow yourself to have an experience that doesn't necessarily seem like something you want to have. And I think this is particularly true for these hypnic jerks, hypnic awareness, but even vivid dreams or like sleeping little, etc. If you're resisting that, if you're like, I don't want to have this, I don't want to go another night where I feel I didn't sleep at all. I don't want to have another night of vivid dreams. I don't want to have this hypnic jerk again. Then you're building kind of pressure. How should I put it? You're really hoping that you won't have it, and that hope, that wanting not to have it, you know, it makes you pay extra attention to what's going on in your body, and you're more likely to have it. When you go the other direction, you're like, all right, I might have this hypnic jerk when I'm about to fall asleep, but that's actually normal. It's a process of falling asleep. I might feel like I might feel tonight like I don't sleep at all, but I know I do sleep more than I think. I might have these vivid dreams, but they're not going to hurt me. When you have that more acceptance approach, you're willing to experience these things, then you definitely have less of them for sure. And now, if you get to a point where you're like, or rather, if these are not sort of isolated events, if you know there's some more of an underlying cause for the underlying hyperarousal that's underlying the things, meaning specifically what I'm talking about here is if you have more of general anxiety, if you know that you are generally anxious, and that's probably why you're also hyperarousal and these things happen, then I want to say this: check out the description to this video, and check out the self-coaching model. It's a playlist with a series of videos that go over how your mind works and how thoughts really our thoughts produce our emotions, and that emotions are not, it's not this emotional roller coaster that, emotions have their life of their own. Thoughts are really what are behind them, and how you can work on your thoughts to have less anxiety. I think that is super, super helpful. And if you do check out that playlist and you find that, I like this, I think this is really helpful, I would like to actually know even more about this, then check out our self-coaching program, our self-coaching master program, which is really built on this model. I think it is really good for someone who has trouble sleeping and maybe also anxiety, because this model is so good for really anything, but particularly anxiety and, of course, insomnia. So I hope this was really helpful. If you have any question, then please leave a comment or send an email to questions@thesleepcoachschool.com. With that said, I'll be back tomorrow and Friday as well, and I hope to see you back here real soon. Until then, take it easy.